In the Wild West, some churches weren't built to save sinners, they were built to bury them. And some preachers didn't preach God's word, they did the devil's work. This is the story of 40 unmarked graves and the man who dug them up to uncover the truth. Because sometimes the most sacred places hide the darkest secrets. Thomas Brennan came to Hollow Creek in the fall. The leaves were falling and the air grew colder with each passing day. The sky had turned a leaden gray, as if nature itself was drawing a veil over this town. Thomas was tired, not just in body, but in soul. The war had taken him, chewed him up, and spat him back out as wreckage. He'd fought at Gettysburg. A bullet had hit his leg there. He'd spent 3 months in a hospital, then returned home. But when he got back, there was no home. His wife Emily had succumbed to typhus. Neighbors had already buried her. His son Jacob, only 7 years old, had died of dysentery. His grave lay beside Emily's. 2 wooden crosses, 2 names, 2 lives mixed with the earth. Thomas had stood at those graves for 3 days. He hadn't cried. He couldn't. He was so empty inside that even tears wouldn't come. Then he'd stood up and walked. North, south, east, west. He didn't know where he was going. He just walked. And finally, he came to Hollow Creek. The town was small. Main Street, a few shops, an inn, a barber, a doctor, and at the top of the town, an old church. Wooden, painted white, but the paint was peeling, rotted boards, broken windows. A for sale sign fluttered in the wind. When Thomas entered, dust clouds rose into the air. The wooden pews were rotting, the altar was crooked, the cross had fallen. But for Thomas it was enough. This place was quiet, and quiet was all he wanted. Beside the church was a small cabin, 2 rooms, 1 stove, 1 bed, and behind it, a graveyard. When Thomas first walked to the graveyard, he stopped. 40 graves, lined up in rows, but none had headstones, only mounds of earth. Some had collapsed, some were covered with moss, some had wild grass growing on them, as if the graveyard had been forgotten for years. When Thomas got the key to the church from the cellar, he asked, "Who are the people in the graveyard?" The cellar was a hunched old man. Thick glasses sat on his nose. He rubbed his hands together and shrugged. "Oh, sinners. Prostitutes, thieves, murderers. Father Cornelius used to bury them, but no one thought they were worth the expense of a headstone." Who was Father Cornelius? The old priest. He served here for 40 years. He was a good man. He wouldn't even turn away sinners. He opened his door to everyone. When he died, the town missed him greatly. Thomas nodded. He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't care. The dead were dead, and he was half dead himself anyway. The first week, Thomas lived quietly. Every morning he rose early and cleaned the inside of the church, removing spider webs, straightening pews, opening windows. In the afternoons, he sat in his cabin. In the evenings, he looked at the graveyard. He didn't think about anything. He just looked. Townspeople would occasionally come by and give him strange looks, but no one would talk. One day the barber came. He carried a basket. Inside was bread, cheese, some salted meat. "Welcome, stranger. We brought you some food." Thomas thanked him. "Why?" The barber smiled, but his smile seemed false. "Because that's what neighbors do." But a word of advice: lock the church door at night and don't go to the graveyard. "Why?" "Because some things should be left alone." And the barber left. That night Thomas watched the graveyard from his window. The moon was full. Light fell on the graves, and Thomas noticed for the first time the graves were too fresh. The soil was recent. It hadn't grown grass yet, as if it had been dug just yesterday. But the cellar had said the last burial in this graveyard was 15 years ago. Thomas frowned. Maybe new dead had come. Maybe the town was still using the graveyard. But why were there no headstones? Why were there no flowers? Why did no one visit? That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed. Finally, he got up and went to the window. He watched the graveyard, and at exactly midnight, he saw something. A shadow, moving among the graves, a person, holding a lantern, wearing a hat, walking among the graves, stopping, bending, doing something. Thomas grabbed his rifle and quietly went outside, approaching the graveyard without making a sound. But when he arrived, no one was there. Just the graves, silent, cold graves. and on top of one, fresh flowers. Thomas picked up the flowers. He smelled them. They were real, freshly picked. Who had left these flowers? And why leave flowers on an unmarked grave? Thomas returned that night, but he was no longer at ease. Something was wrong. He could feel it. The next morning, Thomas went down to town with one purpose: to find records about the graveyard. The town's municipal building was small, single-story, wooden, dim inside. When Thomas entered, an old woman sat at a desk. Her glasses were on the tip of her nose, a ledger in her hands. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm the new owner of the church. I'd like to see records about the graveyard." The woman, Mrs. Meredith, turned pale when she looked at Thomas. Her pen fell from her hand. Her eyes widened. You're the new owner of the church?" "Yes. Is there a problem?" Mrs. Meredith swallowed. "No, it's just that no one has stayed there long. The last owner left after 3 months." "Why?" "I don't know, but you wanted records, didn't you? Graveyard records." "Yes." Mrs. Meredith gripped the desk with her hands. "There are no records." "What do you mean, no records?" "There are 40 graves." "Yes, but none of them are official. Father Cornelius buried them, but he didn't keep records because they were sinners, outcasts from society. No one thought their names were worth writing down." Thomas leaned forward. His voice was hard. "So where is Father Cornelius?" "Maybe he remembers." Mrs. Meredith trembled. "He's dead. 5 years ago, he had a heart attack. He was found at the church in front of the altar. He was dead." "Did he say anything before he died?" Mrs. Meredith looked around quietly. Then she whispered, "Yes. He said something. The doctor was there. The doctor heard the priest's last words." "What did he say?" "They're still waiting," he said. "Underground, still waiting. God forgive me." But no one understood what he meant. Thomas's hair stood on end. "Waiting? Who's waiting?" Mrs. Meredith shook her head. Tears streamed from her eyes. "I don't know. But if you have any ideas, Mr. Brennan, don't open that graveyard. Some things should stay buried." Thomas stood up. Some things should stay buried. But not the truth. When Thomas returned from town, the sun was setting. The sky had turned blood red. The graveyard was swallowed in shadows. And Thomas had made a decision. He would dig that night. At midnight, Thomas took a pickaxe and shovel. He lit his lantern. He went to the first grave, the one that looked newest. He began digging the soil. His hands were trembling. His heart was pounding. But he couldn't stop. The soil was soft, as if it had been dug just yesterday. Thomas dug quickly. He was sweating. He was breathless. An hour later, the pickaxe hit something. Wood, a coffin. Thomas held his breath. He uncovered the coffin. Its top was covered with dirt. Slowly, using his hands, he cleaned away the soil. He found the coffin lid. The hinges were rusted. He forced it. It creaked, and it opened. The coffin was empty. Thomas froze. There was nothing inside. No bones, no cloth, no smell. Just an empty wooden box, as if no one had ever been buried. Thomas shook his head. Maybe this grave had never been used. Maybe it had just been prepared. He moved to the second grave. He dug that too. Another hour. His hands bled. His back ached. But finally, he found the second coffin. Again, empty. Thomas's heart raced. This couldn't be coincidence. He moved to the third grave, fourth, fifth, all empty. Thomas collapsed beside the sixth grave. He couldn't breathe. Sweat and dirt covered his face. What did this mean? If the graves were empty, where were the bodies? Or had no dead ever been buried? But then, what were these graves? Why had they been made? At that moment, a voice came from behind him, soft, trembling, an old woman's voice. "You found it, didn't you?" Thomas turned. His hand went to his rifle. An old woman stood before him. She had long gray hair. Her face was lined with deep wrinkles. She wore a worn dress, torn shoes on her feet. "Who are you?" "My name is Esther, and you're the first person to try asking the right question." "What question?" "If there's no one in the graves, where are they?" Thomas stood up. He didn't lower his rifle. "You know, don't you?" Esther nodded. "Yes, because I was one of them." Thomas's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Esther walked into the graveyard. With her old hands, she touched the top of a grave. 40 years ago, I too was a woman who came to this town. Young, alone, hungry. My husband had died. I had no money. I was looking for work. Father Cornelius offered me shelter. I could stay at the church, he said, until I found work. I was grateful. The first night he gave me food, warm soup, bread. I slept. But when I woke up at midnight, I realized I was in the basement. I was chained. And there were others. Thomas's breath caught. Others? 12 women, all young, all missing. Some had been there for months, some for years. The priest was holding us captive, and from time to time, men would come, rich men. They would inspect us. Then they would pay money and choose one. And that woman would never come back. Thomas's hand clenched into a fist. His voice trembled with anger. The priest was selling them. Yes, as servants, as prostitutes, as slaves, and in the official records, they were all dead, buried. Their graves were here. No one searched because everyone thought they were dead. Thomas looked around. 40 graves, 40 empty coffins, 40 women. All of them, all sold, most. Some died, really. They got sick, they died, they were buried. But still no headstones were placed because they were sinners, society's garbage. So how did you escape? Esther lowered her eyes. I didn't escape. Someone bought me, a rancher, an old man. He had no children. He was alone. He took me to his house and he set me free. He said, "You're free. Stay if you want, leave if you want." I stayed because I had nowhere else, and he was a good man. He treated me well. We married. We lived together for years. When he died, I stayed here because I knew others were still there. Thomas held his breath. Others? They're still there? Esther bowed her head. Her voice was a whisper. The priest died. But the basement is still there. And if that basement is still being used, yes, they're still there. Thomas turned. He looked at the church. It looked dark, silent, dead. But inside, maybe there was life. Lives that couldn't scream. Show me. Thomas and Esther entered the church. Inside was dark. Thomas raised his lantern. Light illuminated the pews, the altar, the cross. Everything looked normal, but Thomas knew the truth was below. Esther walked to the corner of the church. There, a large rug lay. Old, worn, dusty. Here, she said. Thomas lifted the rug. Underneath there was a hatch, iron, locked, rusted, but still solid. On top was an old Latin inscription, Hic sunt dracones, here be dragons. Thomas got a crowbar from his cabin. He forced the hatch. The hinges screamed. The iron broke. And when the hatch opened, a dark stairway appeared. From below came a faint light and a smell, not fresh, old, sick. Thomas took his rifle. Stay here. Esther shook her head. No, I'm coming too. I left them. Now I'll bring them back. Thomas nodded, and together they descended the stairs. The basement was cold, damp, and dark. Thomas lit his lantern. Light flickered shakily on the walls. The walls were made of stone, wet, slippery. And on the walls were iron rings, for chains. The basement was long, like a corridor. And on both sides of the corridor were cells, separated by iron bars, small, narrow cells. Thomas walked forward. The lantern light hit the first cell. Inside was a woman. She sat on the floor. Her knees were pulled to her chest. Her head was down. Her hair was long, tangled, dirty. Her dress was torn. Thomas approached. Hello? The woman raised her head. Her eyes were large. She was afraid. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then she screamed. A long, sharp, painful scream. Thomas stepped back. Calm down! I won't hurt you! But the woman kept screaming. And then other sounds came, from other cells, other screams. Esther rushed forward. Calm down! He's here to help you. The screams slowly stopped. The women looked at Thomas. In their eyes were fear, suspicion, and a small hope. Thomas looked at the cells, 6 women, all young, all thin, all wretched. Thomas's voice trembled. You're still here. One of the women stepped forward. Her face was dirty, her eyes sunken, her lips were cracked. Who are you? My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm the new owner of this church, and I'm going to get you out of here. The woman began to cry. She fell to her knees. Please don't lie. They've said it so many times and it was always a lie. This time it's not a lie. I promise you. The woman nodded. She was crying. No one has believed us for years. When the priest died, his men took over. They kept us here. They sold us. Some of us. Thomas clenched his jaw in anger. Which men? The sheriff, the mayor, the doctor. They're all partners. After the priest died, they took over the business to make more money. Thomas looked at the cells. The doors were locked, old, rusted, but still solid. He took his crowbar. He forced the first door. The hinges broke. The door opened. The woman came out. She was trembling. Her legs could barely carry her. Thomas broke the other doors too, one by one, 6 women, all free. Come with me. I'll take you somewhere safe. The women looked at each other, then at Thomas, and slowly they walked toward the stairs. But when they came up, someone was in the church. Sheriff Harlan Cobb, gun in hand, a cold smile on his face. Thomas Brennan, warnings were sent about you, but you didn't listen. Thomas raised his rifle. He pushed the women behind him. Step aside. Or what? You'll shoot me? In a church? In God's house? Thomas's finger moved to the trigger. This isn't God's house. This is hell. The sheriff laughed. You're right. And now you'll become part of hell. Because what you've done is illegal. You're a criminal. These women are property of society. You stole them. I didn't steal them. I saved them. Saved them? They're sinners, prostitutes, thieves, murderers. Society didn't want them. We gave them a place. We fed them. And you took them. That's theft. Thomas stepped forward. You fed them? You chained them. You sold them. You're like a monster. The sheriff's face tightened. He aimed his gun at Thomas. A monster? Me. I'm just doing business. Father Cornelius started this business. I just continued it. And this business keeps this town alive. The rich pay money. We survive. This is survival. This is murder. The sheriff pulled the trigger, but at that moment there was movement from behind. Esther. She held a dagger, old, rusted, but sharp, and the dagger plunged into the sheriff's back. The sheriff screamed, stumbled forward. His gun fell from his hand. Thomas lunged forward, grabbed the gun. The sheriff fell to the ground. He was trying to breathe. Esther, you betrayed. Esther shook her head. No, I just did what was right, what you should have done. And the sheriff took his last breath. Thomas looked at the women. Come on, let's get out of here now. The women went up, to freedom, to the night air, and for the first time in years, they could breathe. The next morning, a crowd gathered in the town square. Thomas held Father Cornelius's old ledger. He had found it in the church, in the basement on a hidden shelf. Inside, everything was written. Names, dates, prices, buyers, 40 women, 40 lives, all sold, all missing. Thomas read aloud. Margaret O'Donnell, $1,849, $30. Buyer, Samuel Hughes, Elizabeth Carter, $1,851.40. Buyer, Dr. Franklin Moore. The crowd murmured. Some were shocked, some were angry, some knew, but had stayed silent. Thomas continued, 40 names, 40 prices, and finally he opened the last page. And now. In the basement, 6 women are still being held. Here they are. The 6 women stepped forward, thin, wretched, but standing. And they testified. One by one they told their stories. The crowd cried, some cursed, some apologized. That day, Dr. Moore was arrested. The mayor tried to flee but was caught. The federal marshal came to town, and the women testified, officially. And Thomas returned to the graveyard behind the church. This time, he erected real headstones, 40 headstones, but this time not for empty graves, for real names, for the names of the rescued women, to remember them. 3 months later, spring had come. Wildflowers bloomed in Hollow Creek's graveyard. Thomas sat on the church porch. He held a cup of coffee. Before him stretched a wide landscape, hills, valleys, river. Peace. Esther came to his side. You're still thinking. Thomas nodded. Yes, there might be others in other towns. Other women might be waiting. Maybe. But today here, 6 women are free. 40 graves are now filled with memories, and you made a difference. Thomas smiled. We made a difference. That evening, as the sun set, Thomas looked at the graveyard one last time. 40 headstones, 40 names. They were no longer forgotten. And the church was no longer a dark place. It was light. It was hope. And it was a place where second chances lived. In the Wild West, they say the darkest places host the brightest lights, because the deeper the darkness, the more valuable the light. And sometimes, standing above a grave doesn't mean honoring who lies there. Sometimes, digging that grave means uncovering the truth. Thank you for being here. If this story stirred something in you, memories of old days, dusty evenings, and the sound of hooves, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. So every day we can meet again, and I'll tell you another story from the Wild West. What did this story make you feel? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed it, type 1. And don't forget to subscribe for the next gripping tale. I love you all, listeners of Wild West Daily. Stay healthy and happy.